and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm Justine, your host, and today we have Reilly Brock. Hi, Reilly. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm so excited. How does it feel to be on the other side of the podcast?
It feels fun, actually. I like switching it up. It's interesting for me as a host to be a guest every now and then because you can kind of appreciate all of the craft that goes into creating a fun episode and entertaining and educational content for people. So I always love it. I just love talking to people about food and the environment. So any chance to do that is a good day, in my opinion.
I agree. So tell me, how did you get into food? What was that moment that brought you into it?
I first got into food in high school, actually. It was how my high school friends and I would hang out. We'd do these like kind of silly dinner parties where we'd just cook together. And at first it was just a way to pass the time in high school. And, pretty quickly I got pretty into cooking and just found it a really fun learning curve. It's like always challenging, but there's always new things you can master and get better at. And, I think as your audience appreciates, it's something that's really fun and easy to share in terms of like a hobby to be working on as a young person. I found it really rewarding that whatever I was working on, I could share with friends and family immediately and get feedback. And, even if you mess up, it's still usually pretty tasty. So that really got me hooked, just that experience of cooking with friends. And then when I was in college, I actually had a friend who pitched to me a kind of crazy idea that we should start a late night food cart because there was no good food on our campus.
Where did you go to school?
This is in rural Ohio at a school called Kenyon College. Yeah, so it was like an hour outside of Columbus, and basically the only option late night there was like Domino's or Papa John's Pizza, which is not great, and you'd often wait forever to get food. So if you just left a party, for example, there was nothing to eat the way that at like UC Berkeley, if you leave a party, you can go to Top Dog or a taqueria or something that's still open, but where we were, there was nothing. And so he pitched me this idea of we should start a late night food cart. And I was young enough and naive enough that I was like, great, let's do it. And I didn't think about all the logistics and, expenses and complicated stuff that went into running a food business. However, that was a blessing in that we dove into it headlong together and actually developed a business plan that we pitched to an entrepreneurship panel. Basically, they had a business plan competition of saying, pitch us your idea. The top prize was $5,000 in startup capital, which is huge for like a small college business. And yeah, so we really dove into it together. We were really passionate. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we were excited enough that we were willing to do the homework. And we ended up winning that top prize, which launched our business, Last Call Food Cart. So for basically a year there in college, my senior year, we were running a late night food cart outside of parties, which was wild. It was fun. It was stressful. It was educational. It was delicious. It was all that you would imagine a late night business like that would be. I mean, the business model was awesome and kind of bulletproof, and that it's kind of shooting fish in a barrel, like feeding kind of drunk and stoned and just hungry college kids late at night. Working late at night, serving food is not glamorous. It's a lot of time on your feet, a lot of lifting and handling stress and last minute setbacks and stuff, but it taught me a lot and really ultimately catapulted me into a career of professional cooking for a couple of years. So after that experience in college, I did an apprenticeship at a restaurant in Spain. So I was cooking there. And that was, again, I was in way over my head in the best possible way. Like I was going from this business, which was mine, to suddenly working in someone else's kitchen in a second language, which the only way I can describe it is like running wind sprints wearing a snorkel. Like it was just so hard to process and keep up with everything. All of the new systems and it all being in Spanish, but it was great, and anything that challenges you that much teaches you a ton. And so those years in my like early 20s working as a professional cook just taught me a ton and skills that are still with me to this day and really inform the work I do now. Ultimately, though, I did burn out on food as a full-time passion in terms of like the restaurant world. It was just not sustainable. And, around like 23, 24, I just realized like, this is not for me. The late nights, the never seeing friends and family, it ended up being too much, which was actually a blessing in retrospect that I got out of it. Cause ironically, the part of that world I always enjoyed the most is actually on my days off, cooking with friends and family and kind of teaching them the little things I was picking up at the restaurant that they might not know about. And it's really that became the seed of everything that followed. Like that experience of like learning and teaching and kind of being this conduit between one part of the food world and like the general public. Like that's what I really wanted to do full time. And interestingly enough, that's what I ended up doing here today at Imperfect. So I ended up finding a job that was bridging food, but also communications, which is really what I was looking for all along. But I think as a young person, I had to just try it on, like wear the outfit of cooking and learn that for myself that, okay, I don't like cooking full time, but I do want cooking to be part of my world, if that makes sense.
So tell me, how did you bridge the gap to food and beverage? I mean, that's a little bit of a leap. I mean, it's not a completely non sequitur. It's in the same wheelhouse, but it is a little bit of a different, it's a bit of a pivot.
Yeah, no, 100%. I definitely, I took a kind of sharp left turn around that time, like 24, 25. Basically, I got a job doing event planning out of restaurants. And that was kind of a half step away from cooking food to just planning things around food. But I don't know if you've worked in event planning, but I heard it described once as it's like herding cats, except the cats are on fire and you're on fire and you're in hell, which was kind of my experience of it in a lot of ways. I mean, I learned a lot, but boy, is event planning complicated.
I mean, I haven't been in event planning in the sense that aside from planning family or friends events, right? But I do feel like with NextGenChef and planning all these events pre-COVID that were in different locations, whether it was a co-working space or whatever, there is an element of event planning, from content to the way that it looks, the feel, the whole ambiance of the event, the way it flows. And even these online events, while people think it's just a Zoom, there's a lot that goes into it, from the agenda to the talent that you bring in and the experts, and then the whole flow of the event to make sure that it goes from A to Z with no hiccups.
100%.
And half the time they're live, right? And they're being recorded. So it's not like you had this mistake in the corner and somebody, put the dessert on the wrong tray. This is going to live on beyond us. So it's event planning exists more now, I think, than ever, just in a different, it's sort of been reframed, I think.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I relate to that a lot. And yeah, when I was doing it, I was doing events with food trucks, and it was just, it's complicated work. And like you said, there's a lot that goes into setting up something that people don't think about. And so it was an interesting halfway house for me, kind of between the world of professional cooking and the world I'm in now. But basically the part of it I latched onto and enjoyed the most was the content marketing side of it, the creating the Facebook page and answering people's questions and sharing ideas about what we were up to. And so that was where it really stuck with me, that I would love a job where I got to, say, run like a social media page for a food company. And it happened that at that time, this is in 2016, Imperfect was hiring for someone to run their social media pages. So it kind of seemed like it was a perfect fit. And it was one of those cover letters that kind of wrote itself. And the interview was super fun and interesting. And I got really excited preparing for it, which is always, I think, a good sign. If getting ready for something is kind of a fun challenge, that's a sign that it might be a really good role for you. And so that's how I got into it, was they needed someone to help be their person, their voice, their communications bridge to the general public. Their social media pages were in their infancy. We did not yet have a newsletter. There was so much that we weren't doing that we needed to do in terms of reaching and educating our audience and our customers, but also just the general public, that I got to do from day one, because it was a scrappy startup. I was like showing reporters around the warehouse within a week or two, which is, again, I was totally unqualified to do, but it was a startup. So they needed somebody to talk to press. And I said, hey, like, I've talked to press before and I did events, like, I'll do it, which is, I think, one of the most empowering sentences you can say, especially as a new person, is I'll do it. If you're up to it, you end up learning a lot. And if it's something you care about, you can kind of teach yourself a lot of what you need to know. So yeah, they put me in the game pretty early there and let me run with a lot of stuff, because, they just needed a lot of things done, which was certainly stressful. It definitely felt like drinking from a fire hose some days, but again, really educational. And, since then the company has grown like crazy. And as I've been part of it, I've, just had to learn more and more and really grow my skill set alongside, which has been great. It's been a really fun ride.
And so when you first came in, you were doing some social media, and you it's a startup. I mean, after all, we're all really scrappy, right? We do 100 different things. So today, how has that role evolved for you?
Yeah, so today I'm the associate creative director. So I have a hand in the world of social media and that stuff, but I'm more in just the pure content realm now. So somebody else is actually now we have a wonderful new copywriter. So she's actually writing all the copy for social, and we have someone else who's running our newsletter, but I'm really responsible for crafting and editing the messaging that ends up living on all these different platforms, whether it's social, newsletter, stuff on our website, the Facebook ads we're running, basically
Storytelling.
Storytelling. The way I think about it is like keeping the torch of the brand lit, you know what I mean? And being the steward of that brand voice, and also helping it evolve and change, because, you know, no company is static. And as we've grown and changed, like the brand has had to grow and change and mature as well. And even like, you know, world events shape that. Like this year, our company has had to learn how to talk about a pandemic, racial unrest, wildfires, all in the the course of about 6 months. So your brand has to always grow and evolve and mature as well, because, you know, that's what people, I think, want and expect is a company where it feels like somebody's home when they're reading your content, and also that they know that you care about some of the same issues that they do. You're not just about like, we need more signups. Like you gotta be out there as an empathetic, generous personality, I think. And that's always been our take on brand and how that should work.
I totally agree with that. I also think they want to see that you're relatable, that you're part of the community, not that you're sort of up here and you're not paying attention.
Yeah. 100%.
Because right now, more than ever, I feel like people want to see empathy. And I think that being humble and knowing that and communicating that we're all in this together and we all have different challenges is so important, both personally and professionally.
Yeah.
So coming back to that, you know, you representing the brand and writing that communication for that, tell me a little bit about that. How do you, you know, as it's always changing, right? And we have COVID and we have the fires, and you don't want to downplay one and upplay one. And how do you come through that, represent the brand and be mindful of everything going on, but yet not go in sort of too deep? So it's like saccharine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really hard, to be honest. You know, we've had to modulate our brand voice, I think, more this year than ever before. And I don't mean that in like a jargony business way. I mean that in like the way when you're talking to a friend who's dealing with, they're grappling with the racial unrest in the world, and then they're grappling with a wildfire, and they're grappling with COVID. Those are all very different emotional states. You know, they're similar in that there's this level of unrest and uncertainty and stress, but the type of information or reassurance you need are really different in each of them. So I think part of it has been really getting researched, you know, researching the moment that we're in and figuring out, okay, how can we help? Because when you look at what do people really want and need right now from anyone, you know, even just a friend, not even a brand, it's really help and support. And so sometimes that's, you know, the form of knowledge. Like after COVID really became a serious issue, we did this post that just kind of tried to educate a bit about how food supply chains work and reassure people that, look, like you're going to see some bare shelves in stores, but trust us, there's more than enough food. It's going to be a little challenging to get it where it's needed. And we have experience with that. Like that's our whole business model, is rolling with the punches of how crazy supply chains work. But trust us, there's more than enough food. Like literally our company was founded around the idea that there's more than enough food. We just need to be better about getting it to the people that need it. And I think also, you know, reminding people that like, yes, this is uncertain, but we're really committed to you. Like we're here for you. And, you know, I think for a grocery company like us, like at that point, we were kind of part of the safety net. This is no longer a fun luxury option of like, oh, groceries delivered. What a novel concept. It was like during COVID, that suddenly became an essential thing for people. And that was really humbling for us, and at times challenging in terms of the amount of new signups we were having to deal with. You know, we had hiccups too of like more people signing up than we could handle in some metro areas, you know, suppliers saying, hey, no, we can't fulfill that many orders of, you know, whatever it is, quinoa, onions, citrus. Like we were having to adapt in real time. And so I, you know, part of it was just being honest about that too. I think a challenge for us was is owning up to mistakes, because it happens as a business. You know, no business is perfect, and obviously you want to ideally underpromise and overdeliver, but at times you end up doing the inverse, and that's really stressful for your customer base. And we definitely had a couple moments of being humbled by our circumstances and having to come to our customers and saying, hey, look, like we grew a little too fast there. And that's a hard conversation to have. And it's terrible to let people down, even just friend to friend, person to person, but especially when you're a company and somebody's counting on you for the fruits and vegetables and pantry stuff they're relying on to make dinner. And then when you have to say, I'm really sorry, but like our drivers are just overtaxed and we can't deliver to you tonight, that's a hard email to send. And this was definitely a year of sending a lot of hard emails, you know, when we had these moments. And I think, you know, it ended up just involving a lot of empathy and learning and willingness to be wrong and just try to do our best to make it right the next day. And also knowing that, like, look, this is a year everyone has to be flexible. So in a way, we also had to let go of a lot of pre-existing plans we had. Like, we had a whole marketing plan for 2020 that we scrapped like late in February, early in March, just because it was no longer helpful. And,
Right.
you know, if we come in with the plan we had, people would have said, oh, this is tone deaf. What are you talking about? Like, we have bigger fish to fry right now. So I think part of it is you got to know when you just need to abandon what you had planned and start listening and learning instead of just talking at people. And I think that was,
thing, frankly.
yeah, it was hard.
Just literally, they canceled Show West on a Monday. On Saturday, I decided I wasn't going.
Yeah.
And I put a post on LinkedIn and I said, for anybody that chooses not to go, or, you know, it's been canceled by your company, or for whatever reason you decide to pull out, we've just posted or put up a free forum. You can connect with other people. We've made all the access free, whether you're a distributor, a founder, whatever. And we put it there for everyone to have access to, because that was all I knew I could do.
Yeah.
Have a positive response to it. I had all these meetings set up. Founders, these new startups had meetings. People are expected to do business there.
Yeah.
So we went from doing events and all these different things in person, cultivating community, connecting people, to now within 48 hours, literally creating an online community. And we then actually launched our app. I don't know if you've seen it, but we have a new NextGenChef app.
Oh, awesome.
And so we completely changed. Otherwise, we would be doing events right now and all sorts of things in person, which is a completely different business model than what we have going on at this moment.
Yeah.
It still funnels and supports the same mission, but the way that we're getting there is just a little bit different.
Totally. I mean, I think that flexibility is key. I mean, that's something I learned early in food, is that, you know, a phrase I heard was, you're never going to outsurf the ocean, but you still have to kind of ride the waves as best you can. And
I
you know, at the time, that really referred to, like, you know, when you're working as a line cook, you're never going to be able to control how many orders for one thing or another come in and what you have to be cooking at any given moment. You have to react and just do your best to rise to meet the moment. And on a certain level, you know, resenting that, oh, you have a lot of chicken to make and you wish you were making the salad instead, like, that doesn't do anything when a bunch of people are expecting chicken from you. And so that was a lesson I learned early that I think has actually really helped this year, of like, look, we all have to be extra flexible and extra resilient right now. And that's challenging, but it's actually a good thing. And it can build character and strengthen whatever business you're doing. If you can find a way to roll with the punches and evolve, that's awesome. And like, that's how you really grow and thrive in the long run, I think, because life's always going to throw crazy stuff at you. I mean, this year's been particularly hard, but I don't think it's going to get much easier after this, you know?
Let's hope. I mean, hope is not really a great strategy, right? But we'll think positive thoughts. I want to go back to what you were saying, though, about storytelling, just for a minute, because I think that the gift of being able to tell a story is just, it's so impactful. If you can tell a good story and you can share it in a meaningful way, it can resonate with people in a way that creates change, and not just in behavior, but in the thought process. So as a storyteller for Imperfect, can you share with us sort of a story about something that you shared and the change that it had for you?
Totally. Yeah.
So, does that make sense? So what I'm saying is, you know, based on the stories that you've created on behalf of Imperfect, I'd love to hear the impact it's had directly to your consumer, your customer, and how it's either created change or had an impact for them and for you.
Yeah, I can share a couple. I mean, one that comes to mind immediately is we do a ton of content around storage tips, because when you're looking at food waste, it's really important to remember that it's multifaceted and it occurs at every point in the supply chain. So Imperfect's direct business model is addressing, you know, what we'd call upstream food waste, which is about 20% of the overall supply chain ends up going to waste kind of on the farm or near the farm level in production, right, in harvesting. But the reality is over 40% of it goes to waste in our homes. Right. So as Imperfect and as any food retailer, your job is not really done once you get the person the food, because if you care about waste, you really want to make sure they feel comfortable and empowered with whatever you're sending them, because an organic, amazing, delicious avocado that you helped, you know, prevent from waste is no good if someone doesn't know how to use it or can't finish it before it goes bad.
Right.
And I know as a Californian, it sounds ludicrous wasting an avocado, but you know, so what we found early on is one of the biggest reasons stuff was going to waste for people is they didn't know how to store it properly. And so we've put out a lot of storage content, little bite-sized infographics on Instagram, or we put together a downloadable PDF on our content site that basically shows you how to store everything in your kitchen and shows you little tips and tricks, like, keeping your cilantro like a bouquet of flowers and water in your fridge if you can. The fact that like tomatoes, for example, like you'll have better flavor if you keep them on the counter. So stuff like that. And I think one of the biggest aha moments I had there was we did an Instagram post telling people to not store their onions and potatoes together, which is, I'd say, one of the most common mistakes.
I store mine together in a bowl.
Oh, no. Take it after this podcast, move them, because I'll tell you why. So the onions will release gases that make the potatoes sprout sooner. You've seen the potatoes will launch those little tendrils out of the eyes. They'll do that way faster if they're near anything that's releasing gas, especially an apple, but even an onion. And then in turn, the potatoes will release moisture that'll make the onions get soft sooner.
Oh, interesting.
So it's counterintuitive, I know, because a lot of us we buy potatoes and onions together, we cook them together, we think of them as these dry storage root crops. All of that is true, but for the purposes of your kitchen, they really should be stored in separate, cool, dark, well-ventilated places. So even if they're both on your counter, just don't put them next to each other, or keep one. Yeah, or keep, some people have different bowls for them in a drawer, or, obviously like the root cellar concept was perfect for this. But basically we did an Instagram post saying, hey, don't store them together. Like I know it's counterintuitive, but they'll both last longer if you store them separately. And reading the comments of that post, I was blown away. We had people in real time tagging their, husband or wife or partner or housemate saying, hey, you need to move the onions right now. And that was really cool for me to see that in real time, something we had thought of as we should do this. We tried it and it had impact in real time. And that's something I always love about social media content is you get to iterate and learn and try stuff out in real time and learn from it. And that's really beautiful to see that, people can take something you put out there and run with it and use it to make a change in their life,
I love that. I'll tell you, I went to the farmer's market a while ago. I go there to get the meat for the dogs, and I bought some apples. And the lady says to me, don't put the apples next to anything else in the refrigerator. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, they will make everything else go much more quickly.
Yeah.
I never heard that before.
Oh yeah, ethylene gas is no joke. And apples and bananas are the two biggest culprits most of us have around. I'll give you an inverse tip though, and we've done this on social too, which is if you want to fast forward the ripening of something, like let's say you've got stubborn stone fruit or a reluctant avocado, put it in a paper bag with a banana or an apple. And that enclosed space with the ethylene will essentially fast forward the ripening process. Make sure it's on the room the room temperature, because this all happens faster at room temperature. And then if it's ripe, let's say you got a bunch of ripe avocados suddenly and you realize, oh wow, I can't eat all of these right away. You can then put the brakes on it if you put them in the fridge, because that'll slow down the ripening process. As a general rule of thumb, the fridge will kind of keep things in stasis, and then the room temperature counter stuff will speed up there. So, you can use that to your advantage in your kitchen.
Yeah, no, I'm going to take those tips. We'll put them in the show notes so everybody else feels like they've got some good takeaways as well for all the listeners and people that participate. But that's super interesting. So I'm curious also, so I know that you guys had a huge uptick in the number of requests during COVID.
Yeah.
So just walk me through, tell me more about that in terms of what that meant for you guys and how you were able to deal with the supply chain and the change in supply chain and your customers.
Yeah, it's been quite a year. So, our demand grew astronomically between March and April. I think it was something like 40% in like a month increase. Cool. Yeah, which is crazy. From an abstract business standpoint, most businesses want that kind of, freakish hockey stick growth. I will say in practice, it's a lot more stressful than the TED Talks make it seem. Like, it's pretty terrifying to have your customer base grow that fast. We were doing our best to keep up, and, we had a lot of things going in our favor, right? We had inherent demand for our product. Grocery delivery was suddenly not a luxury. It was, a lot of people were thinking of it as an essential service. We had a really receptive audience for our content. Folks were cooking at home a lot. And there was also a lot of important work to do around our mission, right, which is preventing food waste, because COVID was disrupting supply chains left and right. So an example of this that made the news was, basically, as everyone knows, air travel has been really down since this started, way fewer flights. And so what that means is folks that used to sell food to airlines have seen a huge downtick in orders. But something I think a lot of people don't think about is when supply chains switch, like I can tell you I don't want to order more in a matter of seconds or minutes, but for you as a buyer or grower, that change takes days, weeks, months sometimes to actually enact, in terms of, you can't just tell your fields to stop growing something. You can't just tell your factory to stop producing something. Like, all of these are very intensive, expensive changes to make that, I would liken to turning a pretty big boat, right? It doesn't just happen like that. And so we found that the Roth Cheese Company, who had been selling to a bunch of airlines, suddenly had a bunch of their cheese trays that they'd been selling to airlines, and they didn't have a home for them, right? So we bought up their cheese trays and we were selling them to our customers. And, on some level, it's kind of funny getting an airline snack tray in your Imperfect box. It's a kind of silly image, right? And, it's funny. But on another level, it's really what our mission's all about, right? Is rolling with the punches, because our food system's unpredictable. And, we really owe it to our producers to make sure that they're getting a fair return for what they're making and growing and producing. And also that if someone's made a bunch of cheese trays, they're not going to end up stranded just because there's a downturn in business, because that happens. Like, that's the nature of the beast. Similarly, there was basically a bunch of movie theater popcorn that got stranded. So there's a popcorn producer we were working with, and they said they'd been growing, producing popcorn for movie theaters, and then the movie theater industry kind of dried up, just like the airline industry, and suddenly they were stranded with a bunch of movie theater popcorn. So that was another chance for us to come in and kind of serve as that bridge.
Oh my, you guys could connect with and collaborate with like Netflix and Amazon that are doing the movie nights.
That would be fun. Yeah, we've actually talked about that over the holidays, is doing like a movie night thing where we have like a fun riff on popcorn recipe. And
because they're already doing the movie nights.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've seen that. That's great. You should do that. That's a good
idea. Yeah. That's what this year's all about, though, right? Is like, look, like, we're all being dealt a lot of lemons. Let's make some lemonade. I know that's a cliche analogy, but there it is.
But I think more than ever now, people are really open to connecting and collaborating, not just locally, but globally. And it's opened up the conversation to expand across the Pacific and the Atlantic, to learn from each other, to see what different processes are working and how people are dealing with these issues.
Totally. Yeah. Well said.
So if that's sort of the silver lining and can create some empathy or empower some empathy and collaboration, I think that I'm optimistic that maybe we can come out of this with a few positive things.
Absolutely.
So what does that mean for you in terms of, for Imperfect, for the future? So how are you guys able to plan based on all this stuff with all this uncertainty?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. The short answer is our supply and merchandising team are just rock stars. They have to embody all these principles we're talking about every day, this kind of sense of humor, empathy, flexibility, and just hard, scrappy work. Because, yeah, it's been harder to plan one sign-up rate, like, how fast we're growing just changes every day. And I think also what's available, like, to get, because if we sign up 100 customers today, suddenly getting 100 customers more worth of food it's not like flipping on a light, right? Like, those are all orders that have to be placed and adjustments that have to be made. So yeah, that's been challenging. I think we learned a ton from the growing pains of 2020. And so I'm actually confident there that we really have what it takes to ride the wave going forward. I think, we were actually able to secure Series C funding during COVID, which is thank you. It's a very counterintuitive time to be raising money, but in a way, we really battle tested our business model. And the consensus from investors was, this is great. It's, it's quite literally pandemic proof, and you're rising to the occasion. You're proving your worth to people. It's not been without bumps in the road, but, and that investment has really allowed us to double down on some kind of unglamorous but important stuff, like even just warehouse inventory management. We're really able to invest this year, being able to serve more parts of the country more reliably, like all of the kind of under the hood stuff that allows our business to just keep chugging along. Like, we've been able to invest in this year, and that's been helpful because it's needed. And I'm sure you can relate, like anything that grows really fast, like you don't always keep up. Your internal systems are often weeks or months or even years behind where you would like them to be if you had unlimited free time. So this year's been a good chance to kind of take stock of like, okay, the boat's now out in open ocean. Where are the holes? What do we need to plug? And I think we're going into the end of this year like a different, better business than we were, say in January or even March.
Yeah, I would feel that. I feel the same way, actually. And you would think that, with everything that's going on, that's unfortunate and terrible. The fact that I can sit here and you can sit here and say, wow, we're in a better place. We're in a good place. We're excited about the future. I think is very telling to how resilient we are.
Yeah, it's been a good year to remember that, yeah, stuff will get hard, but it's within all of us to rise to meet it. And I think also to find ways to reach out to other people, because we're not going to do any of this alone. Like we're all in this together, especially working in food. It's all so interconnected that you can't do anything without collaboration and empathy and asking good questions, and just like working together for sure.
So, I know that COVID's played a huge role in the change of your business and how you guys have pivoted and sort of done all that. But I'm wondering, the fires, and we've been having them the last few years here in California. They're new to me because I'm from the East Coast, but they have to have a big impact. Maybe not today, but they will in the short term and the long term affect the soil that's producing all this food. So how do you think that's going to play a role, either short term or long term, for you guys?
Yeah, that's thank you for that question. That's a really one hits close to home, quite literally. In all honesty, what was it, about a couple weeks ago now? There were 3 fires burning around Salinas, California, where the majority of the country's lettuce and broccoli and chard and kale and stuff is grown for a part of the year. So we were receiving some pretty sobering emails from our growers saying, this is what the fields look like. We might have to short you on some stuff. It's not for lack of trying, but there's some days where it's literally not safe to pick. They were already dealing with a historic heat wave, which makes the work of picking really difficult. You have to shorten your shifts so your workers aren't out in the hottest part of the day. But then they had a time where they were literally picking as ash was raining from the sky. And again, this is kind of how the sausage is made for a company like us. We got an email saying, look, we're going to send you some of the lettuce you ordered, but it's going to have a small amount of ash on it. This is what it looks like. This is what you should tell your customers. This is kind of where we're at right now. And we just need you to meet us halfway. And we had a moment as a business where we kind of had to put our mission, put the rubber to the road on the mission, because if all we cared about was like sending our customers pristine stuff where they never had to worry about any aspect of it, we would have said, no, we're not going to buy any of your lettuce. However, that's leaving a hardworking, struggling lettuce grower dealing with a natural disaster out to dry, and also leaving their workers out to dry, right? So we bought the lettuce and basically had to send out a kind of weird, humbling, awkward email to customers. I mean, I think it was the right move and I think we did it well, but saying, hey, in all honesty, it might be a small amount of lettuce or a small amount of ash on your lettuce, and we just need to roll with that. Just give it a thorough wash. It's fine. We have no reason to believe it's unsafe to eat, but you just got to wash it extra carefully right now, because where a lot of the lettuce is grown in the country is surrounded by not one, but multiple wildfires. And that's it's a sobering message to have to send, but I think something we've learned is it's just important to be honest with people, both in your own company and also just out in the world, of look, like growing food is always riding the knife edge of uncertainty. Like there's so many variables between weather, market conditions, diesel prices, trucking availability,
Right.
issues at the US-Mexico border, you name it. Like pretty much everything that can affect an economy affects food daily in a really intense way. Consumers are largely insulated from most of that, but there are moments where you have to just be honest and say, look, yeah, broccoli prices are crazy right now. We don't have broccoli. Or there's ash raining from the sky. Our lettuce isn't quite what we want it to be. There was a hailstorm and your apples are covered in what look like bruises, warts, but it's just hail damage. It's fine. You can eat it or cut around it, And I think what we've seen and what I've taken heart from is people respond well to that. If you're straight with them and talk to them like adults and say, hey, look, this is what's happening, they often actually appreciate that more than talking around something or pretending it's not happening or not saying anything and then seeing, lettuce that looks odd or apples that look weird and then having to come to you and saying, hey, why does this look weird? Like they want you to be straight up with them. Yeah, exactly. And I think people respond well to that.
Do you think, so and I know that I don't know the answer to this, and you may not know the answer to this, but with these fires, even a couple of years ago when all the houses were burning and they were talking about the toxins from the plastics and all this stuff in people's garages and in people's houses that were burning, and maybe it's not relevant to the fires that are happening right now as much, but that's got to affect the soil and what people can grow. Is there much conversation with the farmers around that?
I haven't heard anything directly about the soil. I think the main thing I've heard about, which is important, I think needs more attention, is the impact on farm labor. I think farm labor is an often overlooked part of the supply chain. And look, these folks were doing unglamorous, often low paid, really hard physical work before wildfires. And then to have them outside picking and smoke is really troubling, and I think brings up bigger questions about what can we do to make sure farm laborers are really safe. I think that's kind of an unresolved question for a lot of us in the food system. I haven't heard anything directly about the soil. I do hear you that, yeah, when a house burns, it's not just wood that's being incinerated, it's plastics and metals. And, if someone's laptop burns, all of the stuff that was in the laptop is vaporized as well. And yeah.
And it may not be an issue today is what I'm saying, right? But is this something we need to think about for the future in the next 10, 15 years? Because it takes 20 years for all that to regenerate. So I wonder what the impact will be on the produce.
Yeah, truthfully, I don't know. I mean, I will say you're bringing awareness to something that's important, which is soil health, which I think doesn't get enough attention. Maybe this is zooming out too much, but I always find it ironic, and I think I get why, but leading up to every election, the food system is almost never talked about. Yet government policies on food, what types of crops we subsidize, what types of crops we don't, things around labor standards, things around immigration, all of that impacts our food system. And we're a country that's we're dying from some of the most heartbreaking yet preventable diseases there are in terms of heart disease and diabetes and metabolic syndromes and all these things. And so, yeah, I mean, in short, I wish all of this stuff got more attention I wish the public media would run stories about soil health. I think that'd be awesome. I wish it came up in presidential debates, what are you going to do to make sure that our nation has a healthier diet? That would be a great debate question.
I'm with you. We're on the same page.
Yeah. But no, I mean, I don't have I don't really even have an answer for you. So I apologize for that. But I mean, I appreciate you asking the question.
Yeah. And it's okay that you don't. At least we're being transparent and we're saying, I don't know the answer. You don't know the answer, but we're bringing awareness to it. So maybe somebody listening to this will have an answer and share it with us.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I would love that.
Yeah.
And at least we can start the conversation, and then we can walk away and maybe find some more information and come back, circle back, and continue the conversation with more, information. So I know that we're kind of running out of time, but I just want to sort of circle back to a couple other things. So now that you're doing the storytelling and you're talking about the brands, and is there anything you'd share with a new founder or somebody that, because you've been with this, right, from 5 years ago to now, you've seen the evolution. Are there mistakes that you made then that you know better now? And what would you recommend to a new founder?
A couple of things. I mean, one, I'll say, and again, outside of the question, that I'm good to go until 3 and actually don't have a hard stop at 3. So if we need to go past then, that's all right with me. So don't worry about your time. To your question, I think for a new founder, I mean, I'll start with the brand voice point. I'll be blunt, the public can sense BS. So in your content, you need to stand out and you need to be earnest and honest with people, because the appetite and tolerance of BS in the public is at an all-time low. People know better. People are wiser. So in terms of your marketing and even the stuff you post on social, people see through it if it's not earnest, if it's not honest, if there's not integrity behind it. So I think that's important, that just you do need to have a sense of integrity about what you're doing and have a clear plan for what you're saying and when you're saying it. And I think the other thing is you need to make your brand stand out in some way. That's obvious. We talked about the importance of story, but what I mean by that is a lot of brands, I won't name names, but I think a lot of brands out there do have a bland or kind of what I'd call cookie cutter personality. When you read their content, it's not bad, but it's very safe, and it kind of sounds like nobody's home. You know what I mean? It's it was written by committee, or it was written months ago, or it was written after being focus grouped to within an inch of its life. And I think, especially in food is all about trust, right? And so you really have to build a relationship with your customers. And it's not enough about just clearly outlining your value props and what's different about you. I mean, that's important, but that's table stakes. I think if you're talking about an excellent brand, you need to build relationships, you need to generate trust. And I think to our earlier point, you need to tell an interesting story. Because, something I've learned through our work is people don't relate to the world through facts and arguments as much as they relate to it through stories, right? And so that's something we have to learn over and over again. And I think in terms of mistakes that we made, I think early on, at times we would try content that was really fact heavy, like these really intense infographics or emails that had like a ton of text, social media posts that were like short little novels. Some of them did well, but the majority of them people either don't have the patience for, they don't have the time for, or it's a little off-putting to be bombarded with facts, especially, if you're a mission-based company like ours, if you're tackling a deep social issue, there's a fine line between giving people meaningful context and kind of bludgeoning them with how depressing the world is. And so I think you need to walk that line very carefully, and also understand that one, people need compelling stories, and two, you have to, and this sounds kind of instrumental, but especially in like growth content, like an email or a Facebook ad, you need to show people what's in it for them, and not in like a mean or utilitarian way, but you need to make it matter, because like a stat I've heard is, especially with like email marketing, people are spending about 3 seconds reading your email, or rather skimming your email, before they delete it or take action on it. So if you're sending even a customer a piece of communications, it needs to be very intentional about what are the values you're providing? What problem are you solving in that moment? And what do you really want the person to get out of it? And it can't just be about you as your company and your agenda. It really has to be about them. And so that's where I really think, empathy and curiosity for your customer base, that's at the heart of all of this. I've talked to a bunch of entrepreneurs through our podcast at Imperfect, the Unwasted podcast. And something that's really struck me is some of the best examples of these entrepreneurs I've seen, they're really empathetic, curious people that did a ton of homework about understanding the community, the group they're trying to help, before they ever built a website, launched their product, started sending emails, whatever. So I think as much as you can be really curious and learn up front, that's huge. And then also, iterate, keep going. Like, the wonderful thing about today's world, and especially with things like social media marketing, is in the modern era, especially with social media, you can ask your customers what they care about and get feedback in a matter of seconds or minutes, right? So we do that at Imperfect all the time. We'll ask people like, what's an ingredient you're having trouble with in the kitchen, on an Instagram story, and folks will chime in and say, how do I cook chicken breasts without drying them out? What the heck do I do with artichokes? What is a sunchoke and why should I care about it? My quinoa always tastes bland, or I find tofu underwhelming. Whatever it is, like, you can get feedback in real time and then problem solve from there, both with content and even adjustments to your service. So I think it's never been easier to learn from your customers and from your audience. I think I would just encourage like founders to do that, do the homework. And it's never done. Also, it's kind of like, painting the Golden Gate Bridge. It's an ongoing effort.
I think that that's so true. And I think that it's an agile process, that you constantly have to be a few steps ahead. You constantly have to be aware of what the environment is and be thoughtful about where you're going.
Yeah.
It's just arbitrary. People are just like, oh, let me just throw it up. I don't think that works. I think
no, definitely not.
Watching and the people paying attention don't want that. They know when you're just throwing something up.
Yeah, I think one other point I have there is, I would say, be over-informed. And what I mean by that is, especially if your brand involves any level of education, right? Teaching people, like in our example, about food waste. But a lot of companies these days involve some level of education about, fill in the blank industry is broken or problematic, and we're solving it by doing whatever. Like, that's a really common trope for especially new startups. What I'd say there is, especially in your content, if you're going to be the bridge between a really complex industry, like whatever, car insurance, grocery delivery, mattresses, whatever your niche is, if you're going to be the bridge between a complex world and the general layperson public, you have to understand it backwards and forwards. And because what I mean by that is, one, you have to distill it down into really simple, compelling terms that people can relate to, understand, and get behind. And I think that requires a level of mastery. And I think also good content oftentimes involves, excellent transitions between stuff, but also knowing what to leave out. And so I think to know what to leave out and what to include in a blog post, in an email marketing campaign, in a social media post, you have to be really well informed about it, both the subject matter and then also people's pain points and how they relate to it. So I think in that sense, being a curious person and doing a lot of research and like going into the weeds on stuff, like that's very much, that benefits you, I think, in the long run.
The only thing I would add to that is, for me at least, I like to feel a voice from somebody, a personality. Yeah. And I really try to, put that foot forward with NextGenChef so that you feel, you know me, you know what my vibe is, you know how I communicate. I try to be approachable. And for me, that's it's not just on personal level, it's for the brand.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for founders and anybody building a business to make sure to remember who they are so that all the communication connects back to your values and your mission.
Yep.
Because sometimes we try to create this perfect thing, or in our heads, it has to be formal. But that's not really, it doesn't match with the brand. So I think it's really important to remember what the voice is and how you want to come across. If you want to be approachable, if you want to be the pillar of, the resource for everybody, and maybe you feel like you need to be, really formal and factual. And but for me, I appreciate a sense of humor. I appreciate when people can laugh at themselves. I appreciate transparency. And I want to feel like I'm talking to a friend sometimes, or somebody that's trustworthy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, another point on that note is you're never going to be all things to all people. And if you try, that's the surest way to fail. The surest way to develop a confusing or hard to relate to brand is to try to make it so watered down and palatable to every different demographic that it's meaningless, right? So the surest way to relate to nobody is to try to relate to everybody. So you also do have to kind of pick and choose, like, okay, who's my target customer here? What are their challenges? How do I relate to them? And like, know that, you're not going to be for everyone. And that's not a bad thing, right?
That's
like
a good thing, actually. It allows you to define yourself and be an expert in your industry.
100%. And it allows the customer to be an omnivore and choose what's right for them. Like, I don't presume to say that everyone should get their groceries delivered. Like, look, if you would rather go to your local farmer's market or be part of a CSA or just drive to Safeway or Walmart, awesome, great. Like, whatever gets you food on the table that you find nutritious, delicious, healthy, meaningful, that's great. All I'm trying to do is show the people that are interested, like, go, okay, grocery delivery sounds interesting. Okay, food waste. Yeah, I'm concerned about that. All I'm trying to do for them is just show them how we can add some value to their life. But yeah, like the reality is no company is for everybody. And I think making peace with that early it benefits everybody in the long run.
I would agree. So my question to you is, I buy my produce from Imperfect Foods, and I want to know what the impact is that I'm having by doing this.
Yeah, totally.
On a personal level, but also to the environment.
100%. I can answer that a couple of ways. One, food waste is not just food waste. Because of embedded resources, when food goes to waste, you're also end up wasting the water that went into growing it, the CO2 that was emitted in growing it, the labor that was involved in growing it, the land that was involved in growing it. So like, nationwide, there's an area that's about the size of Pennsylvania being cultivated, growing food that nobody ends up eating. That's bigger than just ugly produce. That's food wasted throughout the system. But I bring up that stat just to illustrate that, look, like when we waste food, we waste a lot of other stuff. And it ultimately means that, right now we have a food system where to feed 100 people, we have to grow enough food to feed 120 people because a certain amount of it is falling through the cracks along the way. So on one level, and we provide these as impact stats on your account page, you can see like what your embedded impact is in terms of water, CO2, pounds of food and all that, which is amazing. And that's empowering as well. I think another under discussed part of our impact and about food waste in general is making farming economically sustainable. And this is something I really wish got more attention because look, obviously we want to make farming environmentally sustainable. Like I have yet to meet someone that's like, no, farming should be really inefficient. Like we won't all want healthy water and soil and air and fields that can grow food for our grandchildren, right? However, we can't grow food for our grandchildren if farming is not an industry people can get into or want to stay in when our grandchildren are around. And so something I've learned through my work at Imperfect that's been pretty humbling is for farmers, obviously it's always hard to make a profit between weather and the low prices that they're paid for their products, sometimes by big mega marts, and also, just stuff like the unpredictability of demand. We're making it harder than it needs to be in terms of how we buy and sell groceries, up until recently, because anytime you exclude stuff because of cosmetics, or you say, oh no, that's only good for processed food, or that's only good for animal feed, that's a chunk of their balance sheet that they have to write off as a loss or a break even. And for a farmer, like, that could be the difference. Let's say you can't sell 10% of your crop because of how it looks, or you can only sell it to processed food, which gets you usually about 30% of what you'd get selling to the fresh market, or you can only literally ship it off to become animal feed, which gets you nothing. You're just getting rid of it a lot of times. That could be the difference between you turning a profit and you not turning a profit as a grower. So at Imperfect, another thing we pride ourselves on that I hope folks understand and appreciate is this is about making farming sustainable in the long term as well. That, look, we're helping it be viable to grow, any crop and feed people with it, and not have to worry about, like, can we sell all of this? Like, we're making it, there be less friction in the supply chain there, which is huge. And I think, just on like an emotional, existential level, we're making a statement that, one, food waste is an issue we should all care about. And I hope we've raised awareness about that in our 5 years as a company. And also that we can all have an impact. And part of it, starts with finding ways to prevent upstream waste. Buying from Imperfect is one way to do that. That's great. But it happens in our kitchens, in our fridges. So I hope, a part of our impact has been teaching people that they can be part of the solution. When it comes to preventing food waste, how they store food matters, how they shop matters, not buying more than you can consume matters. That's probably the one thing you can do to prevent food waste. Don't buy more than you can eat. No amount of composting or meal planning or prepping or, clever frittatas is going to get you out of your bind if your bind is buying more food than you eat every week. So, I hope we've been able to empower people to have that honest conversation with themselves and their families about, how much they're wasting. And I think if we can have that impact in addition to the upstream supply chain impacts, like, that's when I think we're having a meaningful impact on our food system as a company.
I would agree. And I think that that's tangible. I mean, for me, that's useful to know what I can do with that, how I can store them longer. I'm guilty of wasting food all the time.
We all are.
And I'm ambitious. I go to the store, I'm like, oh, I'll do this. It's too hot, I don't want to cook. It's too cold, I want something warming. I want to have it all.
Yeah.
But I'm trying more, recently to be more mindful of what I'm buying, and will I be cooking? Of course, it has been challenging with the fires. I don't want to cook in the house. And
yep.
I now have a freezer full of meat just because I don't want to use the barbecue, right?
Yeah.
But I think that, maybe if you have a list of those things, I'd love to share them in the show notes or as a takeaway for everybody, so that maybe we can leave them with some tips on how to walk away from this talk and have an impact, make an immediate change.
Yeah, 100%. We've got a post on our Medium page. It's 20 ways you can prevent food waste in 2020. We wrote, wow, that seems like ages ago now, right before this year started. And yeah, I'm happy to share that. We have resources all on our content site, The Whole Carrot, that are all sorts of these things, storage tips, meal planning tips, all that. So I'm happy to share those with you. You can put them in the show notes. It'd be a really fun resource for folks, and hope people read it and benefit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, actually, I'd love to share it on our one of our resources on the app too.
Love it. Yeah.
It would be helpful. So before we close out, maybe I can just ask you what your hope is, the impact you hope to have on the future of food.
I hope to get more people excited about cooking. I think cooking is one of the simplest ways we can improve our health, the health of the environment we live in, and our relationships to ourselves and to other people. So I think if I can have a long-term impact, I would love to inspire more people to cook and to understand new things about food and recipes and ingredients that they didn't know before. So I think, yeah, if I can help people educate themselves and feel empowered in the kitchen, like, that's a really positive change, and hopefully a change that keeps giving, right? Because cooking is really a lifetime skill that has so many benefits, tangible and intangible, in the long run.
I would agree. Is there a favorite? Did you sort of resurrect some recipes during COVID or come up with something new as a result?
I mean, like everybody else, I think I went through the sourdough bread baking phase, which was fun. I will say, I don't want to sound like a hipster about this, but I was actually doing sourdough long before this happened. So in a way, this was just like the bat signal in the sky for me. Like, okay, it's my moment to get back into it. So I'm now a sourdough grandfather. I've given my starter to like 5 different people who have given it to other people, and it's pretty fun to see. I think in terms
of not gluten-free.
What now?
Is it gluten-free or not gluten-free?
The starter? No, I don't think you can have a starter that's gluten-free.
Well, I have a gluten-free sourdough.
Oh, interesting. I don't know. I mean, my starter is literally, it's like a slurry of flour and water and all the microbes in there. I don't know if you can do that with gluten-free flour. Maybe you can.
I don't know. We'll have to ask Sadie,
Yeah.
from what is it? Seriously.
Yeah. I think, in terms of a recipe I discovered, I will share one that I thought was pretty fun. I recently tried making, I think it's called niter kibe. It's an Ethiopian spiced ghee. So clarified butter, which during COVID, I'll admit I've been ordering more food out than I used to, and we've been getting some Ethiopian delivered. And my favorite dish are these lentils that are just delicious, the misir wat lentils. They're so good, and I found out that a secret ingredient is this infused clarified butter. And so I've never made ghee or clarified butter before, so I tried making it. And I will say, folks should try it at home. It's actually really easy, really fun, and really delicious. So basically what you do is you take like a pound of butter and you chuck in like a bunch of like cumin, garlic, turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, cardamom, like kind of like a whole spice kit full of spices. You simmer the butter until basically all clarified butter is butter with the water evaporated. So you simmer it until the milk proteins coagulate and you take those out. The water evaporates and all you're left with is the milk fat, which is then now infused with all of these delicious aromatics. And I've been using that to like saute kale or chard or make really good lentils. And I would definitely recommend it.
Okay, we'll have to share that recipe with the folks here. Well, thank you so much, Reilly, for joining us on Essential Ingredients. This was a great chat. I learned so much about you and about Imperfect Foods, which I keep wanting to call Imperfect Produce. So I apologize for that. But I hope to see you again. And for our listeners, if you like this, subscribe to the NextGenChef podcast. Check out others. Reilly has his own. Maybe he'll share it with us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Unwasted Podcast. We can share a link in the show notes as well.
Okay, great. And I think we also have a discount code for our listeners. If you haven't signed up or if you order food from Imperfect, maybe you can share that, Reilly?
Yeah, absolutely. We made a code for your listeners. So if folks are curious about Imperfect Foods, want to check it out, you can use the code Essential30, which gets you 30% off of your first box or your first order with us. So check that out if you're interested.
Thanks, Reilly, for joining us. So excited to have this conversation, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in months to come.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.